Hello again. Today we're back on the Rim, and we'll be solving world hunger in the most disturbingly Rimworld way I could come up with. It involves genetically modifying a few, willing volunteers to vomit rats, and then working very hard to maximize their time spent vomiting, so that we have enough food to ship all over the world to everybody, completely free of charge.
Wow!
Naturally though, we've got a long way to go before that point. We'll be playing on Cassandra Classic, set to blood and dust, and have 4 starting colonists. Vass is our resident psychopathic defender, and he's also pretty handy at construction. Iron-Willed Ivan is our gardener and doctor, as well as being a pretty solid researcher. Draper is mostly relegated to the mines and the workshops so that people don't have to listen to his creepy breathing too often. And then there's Rat, who's a rat. But she's a little more than that. She's our progenitor rat. She'll act as the source of our foul genetic science later down the line. We also have a monkey named Bennington. I didn't really mean to bring him along, but I don't fancy his chances of long-term survival anyway, so, you know, that problem will probably solve itself. You've probably seen me work a Rimworld colony through its initial stages before, likely a few times by now, so I won't dwell on the details too much. We're settled in a nice temperate forest just to the west of the massive Fen Tishoda, and are quickly throwing up a sizable compound and getting it lit up so that Rat can get to work on research. We've got a lot of that to get through, starting with the basics of smithing, which will lead us to gas extraction, allowing us to have stable power from the local sources of Helixion. Which is from a mod, so I'd best quickly mention that this playthrough is lightly modded, and that you can find a workshop collection link in the description below. But enough of that, our first raid has arrived. From the local hostile xenohuman faction comes, perhaps confusingly, a baseline human. And, well, she brought a knife to a gunfight, so, you know, she's dead now. Which is a shame, because I'd like to grow the colony, but people do have a rather unfortunate tendency to just die when you shoot at them. Anyway, the colony is moving ahead fairly well despite the impending starvation of its colonists. There's an insect cave on the map, and everything we hunt keeps going in there to die, you see, so it's very inconsiderate prey behavior. Eventually though, we harvest some rice, and Rat can put her level 4 cooking to work over the stove to keep everybody from dying. After 13 days here, we've put this only slightly phallic construction together, which should have enough space for our early game activities, which mostly consist of sustenance hunting bears, gunning down Neanderthals, and generally pressing on through research. Oh, and a cougar ate Bennington. I told you he wouldn't last. Somewhere along the line I made Ivan the colony's moral guide, since he's the most sociable of the bunch, and part of his required apparel is a visage mask. So of course now everybody wants one, and our colonist bar at the top looks very stoic all of a sudden. And I didn't notice it happen, but at some point a group of travelers ran into the insect cave and killed all but one of the mega spiders. So let's go see if we can finish the job. It's not the cleanest fight you've ever seen, but with a lot of kiting and a little bit of getting stabbed, Vass and Ivan managed to get it done. No more insects on the map. Very good. Speaking of Ivan, he's turning out to be this colony's token incel. Every Rimworld colony has that one guy who desperately wants to get with someone who's just not even remotely interested. He's hit on Rat 3 times now and just isn't getting the message. And of course, he thinks it's somehow her fault that she's not into him, so he's getting grumpy about it. The base has been expanding to the east a little. An architectural tumor is growing off the shaft of the base to facilitate a basic temple, some individual bedrooms, and now some extra farming space for cotton, heelroot, and perhaps most importantly, more food. And hey look, a wild boomerlope has gone mad and needs putting down. Hey, you know what that explosion reminded me of? Today's sponsor, War Thunder, which features more than 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters and ships in dynamic PvP and PvE combat. All those vehicles are ridiculously detailed, so you can decide exactly how you want to end your opponent's whole career. Whether you're just wanting to sit in your tank in a bush and snipe people, or fly supersonic jets around flinging air-to-air missiles at people, War Thunder has you covered. Similarly, it doesn't matter whether you just want to point the mouse and watch the pretty explosions, or get ridiculously immersed in the simulation with your expensive flight sim setup. There's a control method for whatever you've got. The graphics and sound design are both absolutely top-notch too, so when you blow out your opponent's ammo rack, it looks and sounds as good as it should. All this together makes War Thunder the most comprehensive vehicle combat game there is. I've personally played it for well over 1,000 hours, and For some reason, my most played tech tree is America. I suppose I just really like flying Mustangs. What can I say? So, play War Thunder for free now. Whether you're on PC, PlayStation or Xbox, and use my link from the pinned comment or description below to get yourself a large bonus pack featuring multiple premium vehicles, premium account time, and a shiny 3D eagle head to stick on your vehicles. This stuff is available for a limited time, so go on, click the link. Now, where were we? Yes, I was about to tell you a joke. 3 xenohumans walk into my colony. A disgusting slug human, a tumorous Taukai, and a brain-eating mind devourer. After a not particularly well-managed fight, they all get shot to death and bleed out in the dirt. It's, not really a joke. Anyway, again, I'd like to have recruited one of them, the Taukai specifically, as we've seen before just how powerful they can be. But sadly, they died. Oh well, moving on. Ivan is still trying to get into Rat's pants, for some reason, and also eating people. I don't remember that, but it must have happened while I wasn't paying attention or something. Anyway, don't think too hard about what that says about our food stocks. We've finally finished researching gas extraction, so we can set up some Helixian infrastructure to make a good bit of power and not have to constantly refuel a wood-fired generator anymore. We can also use this gas to set up a fridge, which will hopefully help with the starvation problem. Our next research project is xenogenetics, because it's time to start thinking about our grand purpose, the thing we're put on this world to do, which is to make people puke rats, in case you forgot already. Speaking of which, Rat has food poisoning. She's not a very good cook, but that's not necessarily the worst thing, because it means that she can sit in our currently rather empty library and read a novel whilst projectile vomiting live rats for Vass to gun down. Rat's digestive tract is something of a circular economy, you see. Poisoned food goes in and live rats come back out, etc, etc. You're getting it, right? You see how this works. But now a raid shows up that actually has me a bit worried. The Tox folk finally show themselves and they've brought some guns with them. Thankfully, Giggles here rather balls it up in the tactical front and just walked into his death, kindly donating a machine pistol to our cause, which we'll use to gun down the other 2 who've gone straight for the Helixian pump. Leave that thing alone, it's both important and probably highly explosive. Ivan got a little bit shot, but he'll probably be fine. Pretty much no one here can actually cook very well. I just didn't really consider it to be a valuable skill in the colony where food poisoning is actually the goal. So it's annoying to have the baseline humans slowed down by it so often, but at least we have a freezer that's gradually filling with rat meat. Now the base starts to grow on the other side to make space for more bedrooms, and also a space to do the very awful things to completely willing volunteer colonists in. So while that construction is underway, we get a quest to put down a mighty 6 squirrels in return for the all-important 2 advanced components that we'll need later. That's very handy, so after a short hunt, we've got the goods. Now we just keep working away at research and generally keeping the colony going for a while. With xenogenetics researched, we build a gene extractor and immediately chuck in poor Rat, who, I assume in spite, only provides her gene for UV vulnerability. Yeah, it's completely random what you get out, and a colonist takes 15 days to regrow their genes, in which period extracting them again results in their death. So this could take a while to get what we want. I could have simply given her the rat vomit gene and made this job much simpler, but instead I made her a whole rat xenotype for style points. She's got all the genes you'd expect from a rat person, she just also vomits rats, which I don't think is how rats reproduce in nature, but I don't know for sure, I've never actually checked. Anyway, we'll get what we need eventually. So for now, we'll just be steadily improving the living situation, which of course means building a pool table. Everyone on the Rim just can't get enough of chess, pool, and poker. But more important than happiness is building a specialized quarters for the volunteer workers we'll be hosting, starting with this room that'll serve as a kind of airlock, because I don't think it will smell great in here once it's fully productive. However, this is interrupted by more Tox folk. 6 of them. Spooky. It got pretty messy, and we had to bring out the precious progenitor rat swinging around a breaching axe and honestly not really achieving much with it. But the boys eventually managed to do enough damage that the remaining raiders run away. So once again, of course, no raiders survive for recruitment. Our population is seemingly destined to stay low, which might cause problems later. We need to get those brave volunteers that are willing to sacrifice their bodies to generate a stable, if somewhat disturbing, food source from somewhere, and so far they're not coming from raids. Anyway, everyone's a bit beat up, so there's some healing to be done. And that got me thinking that we should probably build a small emergency hospital near the base entrance, for those wounded in combat to be dragged into for swift healing. So of course now we just want to spend a little bit of time resting and recovering. Enter stage middle, the pigs, who have dropped directly onto Draper's bedroom. This leads to another really not very pleasant fight, which once again involves the completely unskilled and tiny rat woman acting as a human shield for the boys with their pistols. Eventually though, this leaves Laug crawling around on the floor in pain. So finally, we can take in a prisoner. But Laug here won't become one of our very important volunteers, because of course the pig folk are pretty close to immune to food poisoning. They'll just be a regular slave and keep the place clean. It's not particularly exciting, but, you know, it's handy. Apparently Rat was very unhappy about having her genes extracted again whilst ravenously hungry or something, and she decided to dig up a corpse to plop down in the dining room in protest. Okay, fine, Rat. And what genes did we get? Rodent affinity. We'll get the right ones soon enough, I'm sure. As an aside, I also extracted genes from Laug because gene packs are fairly valuable, and we got the reduced pain gene, which isn't too bad, I guess. Once he's enslaved, he puts on his new outfit and gets to work making some real clothes for the rest of the colonists. It's kind of a horrible torment, actually, to make him make real clothes whilst dressed as a gimp, but anyway, he's mainly here to clean up all of the blood and other fluids that arise from everyday life on the Rim. Speaking of blood, at this point I'm starting to think about base defense. I'd rather not just build a kill box because we're all very bored of that. So for now I just started to clear away most of the cover that raiders are using to assault the main entrance, whilst we work through the various firearms technologies. We'll slowly craft some heavy SMGs, and in a moment I'll make some kind of turret pillar things. But first, the volunteer containment cells are finished. They will have beds, I just mean that the walls and doors are built. Sure, I'm going to make them spend their entire lives vomiting rats, but I'm not a monster, they'll have beds. Right, anyway, turrets. Instead of a kill box, I wondered how effective a couple of fortified gun emplacements like this might be. I mean, I don't know, probably not very, but we'll see. To test, we get a couple of hostile events in a row here, with a small infestation in the nearby caves, which was dealt with pretty easily thanks at least in part to the new turrets, which you love to see. And then some impids showed up once again to start the age-old debate of bow versus gun. 99 times out of 100, guns win. But I guess they were banking on being the one. Predictably though, they were in fact one of the 99. I have the technology now for a multi-analyzer, but we're missing the required plasteel. And with none of it on the map, that means we're waiting for a trade ship to give us some. So we'll use this time to plant a massive lawn around our defenses to prevent any trees growing to give raiders cover. Or so I thought, but trees do actually grow on these tiles, so enjoy the green before I notice and replace it with dirt. We'll also lay some indoor grass in the form of carpets around the colony, just to break up the grey and brown colour scheme that's been dominant so far. Draper and Laug both got malaria, but I wouldn't worry about that too much. More importantly, I'd like some kind of cash crop. So despite knowing that it's not a particularly efficient earner, I planted some cocoa trees. Okay, it's time for the quaint home building to come to an end, because the mechanoids are here, and they've brought a climate adjuster with them to make the place colder. Thankfully, they've also brought some rather conveniently placed walls that I expect will make this quite easy to deal with. Firstly, Vass and the boys will deal with the two defenders, a Minotaur and a pikeman. No big deal. And then they'll gun down the climate adjuster while staying safe from the scary turrets. This part is a bit more tricky. Vass will dance with the first small turret, and then we should be able to deal with the other two while staying inside of their minimum ranges. Unfortunately, I didn't realize that they could shoot through each other, so Ivan was actually in fairly serious danger of death here, but thankfully his aim was good enough to take out the charge turret before it got him. And then he safely dealt with the Inferno cannon before retreating from its explosive death. Good job, boy. Wait, what? Draper's gone berserk? Come on, man, we just overcame adversity together, and now we've got to smack you to the ground with our gun butts. Anyway, more importantly, the lawn is coming along nicely. That's the most important thing here. Oh, and here's where I noticed that trees will spread across the lawn as well, by the way. One had the gall to appear right in front of me. Shortly afterwards, Rat once more provides her precious UV vulnerability genes to the cause. Thanks, Rat. Thanks. I grabbed a pair of reinforced barrels from a combat supplier for when mortar time comes, as it inevitably will, and then next a mech hive raid demonstrates once more the fallibility of our defensive solution. The boys had to run out and deal with the problem guerrilla style in the rainy darkness. And to rub some salt into the wound, the cougar decided to try and capitalize on the situation, hunting Draper whilst we were engaged with a pikeman. It's extremely rude, but they managed to get through it. These three boys have honestly managed to win a lot of fights that they really probably should have lost, and for that I thank them. Anyway, with this latest threat, I decide we should probably just embrace a defensive solution that's a little bit more boring, so that we can focus on what really matters. Rats. So we'll start work on a kill box, set up a fabrication bench to supply us with the necessary components, and then we'll gradually fill it with turrets. Unfortunately though, at least for now, the game is resisting my efforts to make a rat farm, because another pigman named Rasher drops from the sky. I guess we'll enslave them. Why not? Well, actually there's a few reasons why not. One of the reasons is that Rasher is iron-willed, which makes them a real pain to convert to our ideologian. Which I never mentioned, by the way, but it's simply called bad people, and serves exclusively to make the colonists okay with keeping permanent volunteer workers on site. Alright, we're extracting rat again, and finally it happens. We get the gene. Along with the genes for smooth tail and low sleep. I'd have preferred to just have the rat vomit gene, because this will make our volunteer workforce considerably hungrier. But at least I guess less time spent sleeping means more time producing rats? Maybe? I don't know. And by the way, I lost about 4 hours of footage from this session because Shadowplay got a little bit balked in a recent update. So if anything after this point for the next few minutes or so looks a little bit like I loaded a save to record a dramatic recreation of events, it's probably because I did. Okay? Okay. Anyway, we have one of the things that we need to start our great task. Now we just need those pesky volunteers. And would you look at that? Here are some now. We arrested Vicky. Yes, that's Vicky, don't ask questions. Convinced her to volunteer, but then Palatina, yes, that's Palatina, just whipped out a knife and started going hog wild. Definitely not running away. So, alright, fair enough, fine, you can leave, Palatina. Yeah, like I said, sorry, I had to recreate events there. But anyway, fine. Oh, Shadowplay, I hate you. So, alright, good. It might not have looked like it, but we now have Vicky as a prisoner. And there's no sense in waiting around. We'll get a xenogerm implanted right away. But of course, then we're interrupted by the dang pigs. You know how Rimworld goes though, right? You spend a load of effort on a kill box and then those dang pig folk just drop right into your gene lab. Yes, it's a gene lab, not a workshop. Don't question it. And they start throwing grenades all over the place. The assholes. But the squad answer the call of duty and put them down relatively easily, because thankfully, heavy SMGs are pretty good. So with that dealt with, let's shift our focus, because Vicky is good to go. She'll be confined to this area, which has its own facilities for butchery and cooking, which are done in the same room of course to maximize uncleanliness. There are currently doors connecting the area that will from here on in be referred to as the Rat's Nest to the main colony area, but soon enough we'll replace those doors with walls, leaving just these wall refrigerators as the handover point for the nest's produce. At least I hope that's how it will work anyway, but we're not there yet. I do need to make sure that the nest is comfortable enough to not induce mental breaks in the volunteers though, and irritatingly Vicky is not exactly the ideal candidate for this job. She's a little bit fussy. But I need to get the cycle started in there. And I think that the fastest way to do that is to provide an alpaca carcass and just have Vicky go to town on it. Sure enough, that did indeed give her food poisoning, as you would expect it to, so let the rats flow. Yes! Yes, it's beautiful! They're alive! On the other side of the wall in the main colony, things are clean and free of rats. However, unfortunately Rasher does have to leave. He's just too needy to be a slave here, so go on. Off you go, little piggy. Run free and tell your friends where to go for discount rat meat. Back in the nest, some more optimization is needed, because it turns out that the summers here are rather unbearable. So now they've got aircon in there. I also, around this time, figured it's probably smarter to switch to the single meal cooking option, rather than the batch bill. I assume that this will, on average, result in more poisoned meals, but I'm not sure, I'm no statistician. She's making plenty of rats in there all alone, but she is really fussy, so we're going to have to do some remodeling. I mean, actually she's the one doing the remodeling, tearing down the walls between all the northern cells and making it into one bedroom containing 4 end tables. Truly, a picture of excess and decadence. The next problem is the act of, well, actually hunting the rats, if you can call it that. With her bare hands, Vicky will get the job done, but she'll usually get pretty scratched up in the process. In one instance, it was so bad that she couldn't treat her own wounds, and I had to open the nest up to let Rat in to render aid. The rat human, not the little ones. You know what I meant. I can just let the rats starve to death. They can't eat from the wall fridges, thankfully, but they can, however, eat each other. So that doesn't really work either, because as soon as one of them dies, it's reserved by another rat, a reservation that Vicky is either incapable or just unwilling to override for some reason. So it seems that we need to do the wet work ourselves. Now, it's not exactly conventional wisdom to arm your volunteer workers, but this isn't a conventional application of volunteer labour. So with her steel Iqua, Vicky is quite capable of working her way through the hordes, and the drafted hunt feature of the Allow Tool mod even mostly automates the process. Nice. So now we're onto something good here. Things are finally starting to fall into place. But one person's puke rats aren't going to feed a whole planet, are they? We need more. And so far the game is being very reluctant to provide them. Until it suddenly isn't reluctant anymore, because a pair of refugees want to stay in the nest for a while. That's fantastic. Unfortunately for them, Orthonet the Dirt Mole is a pyromaniac, which doesn't really align with our corporate values here. Dolores, however, will fit in just fine. So after the pair arrive, we have them wait in the rat meat handover area and show Dolores to her quarters, then proceed to execute Orthonet before she starts any fires. Unfortunately, as new friends join the colony, another leaves. Lauk has decided that he's had enough, and is running off whilst he was out hauling in some steel, so nobody can go and catch him before he reaches the map edge. Damn. Now who's gonna clean the place? From this point we'll be focusing for the most part on the nest and its optimization. But first, a bulk goods trader is overhead named Ratlord Solutions, which I just thought was funny enough to mention, to be honest. Anyway, we bought a load of books from them and then implanted the rat genes into Dolores. I'm also considering some extra medical procedures for the volunteers. Now that there's a couple of them and they're both going to be running around with sharp things, it's inevitable that they'll start to have ideas of escape. One of the factors that influences rebellion interval is their capacity to move. So we're replacing both of Vicky's legs with pieces of wood. That will probably help. And even if they do somehow manage to make a break for it, they'll be considerably easier to catch. As if to replace Laug, a woman named Cindy arrives and asks to join the colony. She's one of the most general colonists I've ever seen, with 7 minor passions spread across all of the different skills. Oh, and by the way, Dolores does get the same treatment as Vicky. None shall escape the peg-legging in the rat's nest. Or maybe they will, because I've discovered a problem with this. When somebody with 2 peg legs gets food poisoning, it affects their mobility to the point that they can't walk anymore. So Dolores is just bedbound, slowly filling up her tiny bedroom with rats. Which wouldn't be a problem if I weren't aiming for the nest to be autonomous. If everybody in there is bedbound, then who's gonna butcher the rats? So yeah, eventually we'll level them up to prosthetic legs rather than peg legs, which will just about let them hobble around getting stuff done whilst actively producing more rats. Now, with 2 volunteers hard at work in the nest, for the first time they've actually filled the handover fridges with meat. And a little while ago I built these pod launchers next door, so we quickly build a pod and fill it with 450 rat meat before realizing that there aren't actually any friendly settlements within a pod's range of the colony. Huh. I didn't really account for that. So, let's just go ahead and add Vanilla Vehicles Expanded to the mod list, and with that we can research the basic vehicles to unlock the Frog and the Toad, a pair of manned transport pods that will extend our range nicely. But we've got to build one first. So Rat works away at the garage bench to make all the various components for a frog, which Draper will then put together in the launch zone. Now, I don't typically do much diplomacy in my Rimworld games, so I spent a while here trying to figure out why I couldn't give free rat meat to a hostile tribe. They just won't take it. I suppose they don't trust us for some reason. So, okay, fine. We'll distribute our rat meat to more grateful factions instead. For the frog's maiden voyage, we head north to the Pepperwick, the home of some friendly pig folk, who it turns out will happily take our 369 rat meat for a whopping 11 goodwill. That's not too bad. But I'm not in it for the goodwill anyway. I just want to make sure everybody's good and fed. I'm kind of this Rimworld's grandparents. If they let slip that they like rat meat, then I'm giving them industrial quantities of it, even if they say they're full. Anyway, back at base we also have an industrial quantity of light leather, so I guess we'll make cowboy hats to distribute alongside the meat, kind of like a bonus. That's a lot of cowboy hats, and I like to imagine they've each got a little rat tail on the back of the brim. Ivan loads up the frog with hats and heads down south to Orthirwood, where he gifts them 24 hats for 26 goodwill. Very nice. Clearly, having heard good things about us, a bulk goods trader from the local tribes of the Biomes Alliance arrives to collect their free batch of rat meat. I repeated this a few times, loading up the frog and shipping away hundreds of rats worth of meat and cowboy hats to anyone that would take it from me. Because the nest is running nicely, but there is still room for optimization. For a start, neither Vicky nor Dolores are really the ideal exterminator. They constantly get quite seriously beat up in the process, so we could use somebody a bit more suited to that task. But at least Dolores can walk now. With a pair of prosthetic legs, she can just barely kind of scoot around whilst poisoned. But the Rim does deliver exactly what I asked for. A Neanderthal raid runs at the kill box, primitive weapons held high in the air. They're burned and shot to death, of course, but leading the charge was Vasny, who manages to fall down early, not quite dead, to watch his fellow tribespeople hit the dirt around him. Vasny, you've come at the perfect time. Let me show you to your new home. His people follow a rather incredible ideology. They actually enjoy being sick. What a novel idea. Well, Vasny, have I got the gene pack for you? So once he's healed up and ready to work, let's see what he can do with his Neanderthal toughness. Oh, the rats won. Well, to be fair, there were something like 50 of them, so I guess we'll just keep bringing in Vas or Ivan with a machine gun to clear them out when the numbers get this high. It's possible that there's some far more interesting way to handle the rat slaughtering process. I thought about how you could just have a safe room for the volunteers to hide in whilst you crank the heating in the nest to cook them alive, but honestly, just making sure to stab them all to death relatively often works well enough for me. I mean, it works well enough that I've had to make a second butcher table in the nest to keep up with the volume of dead rats, so that's a pretty good benchmark, I think. Back in the main colony, we've got a drop pod raid landing just inside the front door. It's simple enough to just draw them outside into the turrets though, so that's not a huge deal. Aside from the fact that Rat was working at the refinery making frog fuel for our humanitarian missions. So this butterfree looking asshole just took the opportunity to carve out her eyeball with a knife. When you really think about it, we're basically running a charity here, and this is how we're rewarded. It's disgusting. Anyway, Rat is dragged to safety and patched up, so now we return our focus to the distribution of bulk rat meat and rat accessories with a few more distribution runs. Speaking of rat accessories, we can't use all of the leather quickly enough, so what do I always say? When in doubt, make sofas. Come on, you've heard me say that before, right? Rat and a few of the main colonists all work together on sewing rat hides together, and then they're loaded into the frog to be distributed to the pig folk, who we're allied with by this point. And if we kept going, then before too long we'd be allied with everybody else. But I think you get the point by now, so we'll call this mission complete. We've shared our meaty goodness and could quite happily keep doing so. I mean, we're sat on well over 1,000 rat meat right now. If I was a bit more patient, then eventually some of the hostile factions would give peace talk missions to us, and we'd be able to give them gifts as well. But that would just mean sitting around doing nothing for hours, so, you know, it doesn't really seem worth it. This could of course be expanded too. If the storyteller was giving me more humans, then I'd build an expansion to the nest, but we mostly get mechanoids showing up at this point, and they don't have the capability to vomit. So there we go. I think I found one of the most disgusting ways to sustain a colony's food supply, and I had enough left over to feed all of the neighbors too. Also, thank you once again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Remember to click my link below to get that juicy bonus pack. Thank you so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, click like. And if you want to see more, subscribe too. But whatever you do, please remain indoors, because the nest is still looking for more volunteers.